Hopefully, we can rise above partisan politics in order to support national security. Some have suggested a barrier is immoral. Then why do wealthy politicians Hopefully, we can rise above partisan politics in order to support national security. Some have suggested a barrier is immoral. Then why do wealthy politicians
If this BuzzFeed News report is true, then we are likely on our way to possible impeachment proceedings.
If it were to be true, it means the president told someone to lie under oath, which very simply is a crime and is impeachable.
If this story is true, we must begin impeachment proceedings.
If you can prove that the president ordered it, that certainly rises to the level of impeachable offense.
We're going to know if the president of the United States committed a federal felony, and at that point we are in high crimes and misdemeanor, and we are in impeachment territory.
Right. Is that an impeachable offense?
This is suborning perjury. I think there's no question it's an impeachable offense.
That is considered an impeachable offense.
Absolutely, these are impeachable offenses.
Inside that answer, I did hear the I word, impeachable.
Impeachment is a very fine alternative way to deal with this.
Democrats will move maybe faster, maybe more aggressively toward impeachment.
There are an awful lot of similarities between a couple of the articles of impeachment against Nixon and the elements of this story.
The very same offense for which the House of Representatives moved to impeach Richard Nixon.
In the past, been impeachable.
That is the exact way that Nixon was kicked out of office.
It's one of the things that drove Richard Nixon out of office.
CNN has not corroborated this reporting.
CNN, we should be clear, has not independently confirmed this.
CNN has not independently confirmed this reporting.
It is important for us to note this morning that neither CNN nor any other major news outlet has so far confirmed BuzzFeed's reporting.
Welcome to today's interview here on Brighteon.com. This is a really critical interview with a guest that was incredibly popular when I interviewed him remotely. It's Dr. Michael Nels, and he's the author of this bombshell book that is a must-read. It's called The Indoctrinated Brain. This is available at booksellers everywhere, and there's also an audiobook version available. This is from Skyhorse Publishing. And Dr. Nels now joins us in studio. He's made a trip to the United States, and welcome to Texas, Dr. Nels.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for having me again. Now in person, it was really a pleasure being here.
It's great to have you here. And the interview with you, it really altered my understanding of neurology and also how people's brains and personalities and decision-making has been hijacked and controlled by very dark forces. You want to give us a quick overview of what your book is about, what your work, your research is about?
Yeah. So my background is actually in immunology. I did a PhD work there, discovering by genetic research a molecule that is responsible and required for the adaptive immune system. That's the way we essentially adapt to viruses and be more efficient in fighting them, naturally, of course. And then I turned to another immune system, the mental immune system, which is essentially under attack when we develop Alzheimer's, when we lose our ability to think, to memorize, and many other attributes which are human and important for humans, to be curious and to go new ways and reflect on things. And of course, our ability to memorize everything that we learn. And I also realized very soon that even for thinking, it's required that we are able to memorize. So our whole individuality is dependent on memorization. So I worked very hard on understanding what is necessary that we can memorize things throughout our lives, because Alzheimer's is not a natural development. It's absolutely unnatural and caused by our way of life, our modern way of life.
What, exposure to toxins and inflammatory factors, or what?
Exactly, and also even though we live kind of prosperous in the, let's say, in the global north, we still have a lot of deficiencies. For example, vitamin D, which was actually exploited in 2000 to develop a program that is unheard of. This experimental vaccination program with genetic material was only possible because we have a deficiency in vitamin D. So this deficiency in vitamin D, which I found out is also a cause or a cofactor in developing Alzheimer's. So a level, for example, where Alzheimer's is essentially as low as the likelihood in developing, and the level that we have in Germany, for example, I come from Germany, in the winter we have like 25 nanomole, in summer we have an average maybe 40 to 50, but the healthy rate would be 125. That is what we measure in tribes, for example, in Africa, people who live in the wild and live naturally. This is in a natural way of living, not protected from the sun in houses, not protected by sunscreen,
right,
not living too far in the north and having no food which supplies the vitamin D. We have a deficiency, and between the 25 we measure in older people on average and the 125, which would be normal, we have a 70% increase of our risk in Alzheimer's.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're covering this. You know, I've been talking about vitamin D for 20 plus years and the chronic deficiency of vitamin D, but especially in North America and across Europe, those with darker skin pigmentation, right? Mm-hmm. Because they have a natural sunscreen that blocks the production of vitamin D in their skin. And yet, you know, their ancestry, let's say a Black American today, their ancestry might be from some country in Africa where they were much closer to the equator.
Exactly.
They had much higher exposure, and they were generating much more vitamin D. Now they're living indoors. Mm-hmm. They're working in an office environment, typically, let's say, and nobody's explaining to them why cancer rates are higher among Black Americans and why prostate cancer is more aggressive or breast cancer is more aggressive.
Absolutely.
So, but your focus on then the cognition effects, vitamin D deficiency causing Alzheimer's.
It causes Alzheimer's. It's not the cause of Alzheimer's, but it's one factor, one of many factors, and that's just one example of deficiencies that we have in our modern life. But we don't, the law of the minimum applies. Things that are lacking is our problem, but also the law of the maximum applies. If we eat things that are not healthy for us in higher quantities, sugar-containing products, for example, leading to glycation of proteins and even the DNA in our cells. These glycation products lead to an activation of the immune system. We call them advanced glycation end products. The receptor for advanced glycation end products activates the immune system because it's almost like you have a piece of wood in your skin. You know, it's something which shouldn't be there.
Yes.
The immune system tries to attack it, gets not rid of it. We have a chronic inflammation, and chronic inflammation shuts down the relevant part or the relevant function of the autobiographical memory center where Alzheimer's starts.
Wow.
And I actually have a picture of that. Maybe we should look at this.
Yes.
Just to give.
Please bring that up. We'll show that next. But one more comment before we get to that. I recall from our last interview, and I suppose I can only recall it because I don't have the highly inflammatory neurodestructive processes that you've referred to. But I recall that you said that the hippocampus is the one region of the brain where neurogenesis continues to take place at any age.
Exactly.
And I've been thinking about that. There are many things that you said in the interview that really altered my understanding of the world around us. One of them being how easily that globalist forces can hijack human neurology in order to control people and to induce things like fear as a means of control. They're sort of weaponizing our neurology against us. But in all the things that I have experienced in terms of learning at my age, in my mid-50s, like, you know, learning, doing Rubik's Cube solving. I do speed cubing now. I solve the cube. That would not be possible without the hippocampus and neurogenesis, correct?
Well, there are certain physical skills you might be able to learn without it.
No, but I mean, it's cognitive.
Yeah,
right?
I know it's
cognitive. You have to
but just to give an example, there was one famous patient which actually led to the discovery of the autobiographical memory being in the hippocampus. And this patient, HM, was his, while he was living, nobody was allowed to tell what the name really is. So it was, all the papers about him are about HM, Henry Molassen. Well, he died later on, almost 50 years later. But he had epilepsy, and it was not treatable anymore. So the surgeon decided to remove this part of the brain where the epilepsy started to commence.
Really?
And but by some reason that nobody understood, he not only removed the part of the brain which caused the epilepsy, he removed on the other side at the identical region. And the region he removed was the hippocampus. Oh. And from that moment on, Henry Molassen couldn't remember anything anymore, nothing novel.
Whoa.
But just, it reminds me just of the cube that you are showing me. He was taught to play piano, and he learned to play piano. Whenever he
played, at a younger age?
No, when he had no autobiographical memory.
Okay.
And so he learned piano, and but because he couldn't remember that he learned piano, he couldn't remember the event, the episodes when he learned, because we call the autobiographical memory also the episodic memory. He couldn't remember the episodes of learning.
So he had the skill of playing the piano, but no memory of having attained
so
that
whenever
skill.
he played, and he was asked, how can you play so well? He said, I'm a genius, I never learned it.
No kidding.
Yeah, but it's just...
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, your presentation, I know you have some critical slides to go through.
I just want to show maybe, because most people don't know what the hippocampus actually is, and we talked about it, and maybe they have to look it up, but it might be nice to show people.
Okay, yeah, you start. I'm going to solve the cube while you do that. How about that? So you start with the presentation. Let's show his slide there on screen. There we go. Go ahead.
It's just a few slides. So you have to think about it when you look here at this picture. This is the brain, and what you see here are two, let's say, orange-colored structures, which are actually the hippocampus. It's our autobiographical memory center, and without the hippocampus, we couldn't remember anything that we have ever experienced.
Right.
And so all these memories, all our personal experiences, are essentially the basis of our individuality. And this is what the slide shows, and it also shows, of course, why the hippocampus is named hippocampus, because when you actually look at it from an anatomical view, it really looks like a seahorse.
Oh, really?
That's why it's called hippocampus.
Okay.
That's actually the scientific name of seahorses, hippocampus.
Okay.
So anyway, in the hippocampus, and you already mentioned it, and I mentioned it in our last talk, all the functions of the, okay.
There it is.
Okay. Yeah, no, you impressed me now.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. Because I tried it once, and it really, I don't think I solved it. Anyway.
Well, I'm competing against the kids that do it in 10 seconds, though.
Yeah, okay.
Because they have little alien fingers that can just brrr like that.
Yeah.
So I'm never going to beat those kids, but...
Yeah, the brain is like a sponge. But to be honest, these cells that I'm showing here, this is a piece of the hippocampus here.
Yeah.
And this is from animals, which are actually old animals, like 2-year-old mice. They are correspond to an 80-year-old human.
Really?
Mice only get about 2 years old. They are old, really old, and they die of age. So they have a very fast life, so to speak.
So you call those index neurons?
I call them index neurons. These neurons, which you see, the green ones here, these are stained because they have certain features. They are newborn. They are newly born in the adult stage. So you are like 80 years old and you produce still these cells. In humans, it's possible. About 1.5% of all hippocampal cells can be generated new every year.
Really?
And are added to the hippocampus. And you need these cells because otherwise you wouldn't be able to memorize new things without overriding previous experiences. And these nerve cells are required to retrieve the information once you have stored them. So every day you store information in the hippocampus, and you store when you have learned something, what you have learned, where you have learned it, and how it felt. Very important.
The emotional impact.
Without emotion, you wouldn't memorize anything. The emotion is really the key for things to enter the hippocampus and stay there.
So this is why strongly emotional events make a much stronger imprint on the neural network.
That's actually used against us. If you have the fear mongering, then everything will be memorized.
Right.
And if you memorize it without the presence of index neurons, then you start overriding.
This also, I think, doesn't explain why so much of marketing and advertising is all emotional.
Absolutely,
now.
without
Instead
emotion.
of informational. They're not telling you,
No.
oh, here's a car and here's the car's properties and here's why it's better. Now it's just you should feel good and then here's a car.
Exactly. So what you have experienced and the emotion doesn't stay in the hippocampus. Every night it's uploaded into neocortical, let's say, hard drive.
Really?
And only the location and the time stamp of the memory stays in the hippocampus. And this time and the location neurons, the space neurons, the time and the space neurons, they together form an index for the memory that has been uploaded and be retrieved again.
Oh, interesting.
And these time and space neurons, these are the green ones you see here. They are newly born every year, and they essentially are required to memorize when and where we have learned something. So if you block this production, you stop memorizing things, and if you block it for a long term, that's what you see in Alzheimer patients, they suddenly don't know how to get home again from where they have been.
You know, let me ask you something.
They have no feeling anymore for time and space.
I often listen to audiobooks when I'm doing work on my ranch. I might be driving a tractor, driving a vehicle. And then I hear something in the book. My brain ties it to that location because the next time I come back to that spot, I involuntarily recall what I heard from the book when I was at that same spot. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Exactly. I remember about 2.5 years ago when I was working on this puzzle, what was happening to us, the world society in the last 4 years, since 2020. And I spent 2 years figuring it out, and I didn't come up with the final idea. And I remember it was almost like yesterday. I stepped out of a shower in a vacation home we had in the Cross Island in the Mediterranean, my wife and I.
Yeah.
We just came back from a hike, I took a shower, was thinking about this whole issue, what was happening the last 4 years. And I can tell you on which step of the staircase when I went down, I had suddenly the idea how everything fitted together, how to solve the problem, or the puzzle actually, how all the puzzle pieces, which individually didn't make any sense, suddenly came together seamless, and I had a complete picture in front of me, and that's what actually led me to write this book.
And so that realization was so emotionally positive for you that it was imprinted.
It was
into your.
It's unbelievable. I mean, every second of the thought process was there, and it's tied emotionally to this staircase in this vacation home. Yeah.
Wow, what an incredible memory.
Yeah.
But you know, there's something else I want to ask you in all of this. I mean, we'll get into more slides, but right now the world is really being entertained by AI, large language model systems. In fact, we're working on an LLM project ourselves too, for alternative knowledge about health and nutrition and so on. But people are so amazed by the neural network in silicon, but they forget about the neural network in here.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, it's like these companies are willing to spend trillions of dollars. OpenAI has announced a $7 trillion investment, I think, in NVIDIA, microchips and everything. But and then people want to throw money at that and invest in it, but they don't want to invest in their own neural network, which is free. Yeah. It's free, and it's a supercomputer.
Yeah, and the problem is that the AI will learn to think better and better, while our thinking abilities will drop and drop. And the more these AI technologies will take over thinking for us,
exactly,
the less we will be able to do it ourselves.
That's right. People will sort of use the AI systems as their cognitive surrogates.
Yeah. I mean, these are space cells, you know, and they remember when we did something. But if you just travel around with your car and you just use the GPS system and you don't watch anymore for signs and signals and anything, you just follow this screen, you have a completely different experience, and you don't memorize essentially as well as you did decades ago when these systems were not present.
Right.
Where you are and where you have been and how it felt to be there. And we lose a lot with technology. We lose essentially the connection to nature.
Absolutely, yeah. That's why, I mean, I force myself to go into nature every single day with my animals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, I walk my goats, actually. They love to walk with me, and we go through the forest and everything. But there's another angle of all of this that I want to bring up, which is that in Western medicine, it is a presumption that cognitive decline is a natural function. So they say, oh, it's just old age.
Yeah.
Well, but that's not an explanation.
No, it's totally wrong. I published a paper, peer-reviewed, in 2016. It's called The Unified Theory of Alzheimer's Disease. And there I show that it's the aging is just a prerequisite because it takes decades for the disease to develop. But that doesn't mean it's the cause.
It's not the causative factor.
It's not the causative factor. In fact, when Alzheimer's, Always Alzheimer in 1906 published his paper, he actually identified it as a weird disease. He didn't see something like this before. And I can tell you people aged 70 to 80 years at that time already in large quantities.
Yes.
Sufficient quantities that we should have seen hundreds of thousands of Alzheimer cases if the rates of Alzheimer's have been like today.
Right.
And in fact, in textbooks of 1940, 1945, big textbooks of neuropathology, the Alzheimer's disease was not even mentioned. And today,
that makes sense.
Today it's a leading disease. So,
yes.
So something has changed the last decades, the last 50, 60, 70 years. And I can tell you what happened. We have a decline in the production of exactly these nerve cells. These index neurons are not produced anymore, and they don't protect us anymore if they are not there. And they are our mental health system, essentially.
Wow. So what is interfering with the neurogenesis production of these?
I would come to the answer to this question in a second.
Okay.
I actually have a slide on that.
Okay, please.
But I would like to show you first why they are so important to us. They are not only important for us that we memorize things individually and can separate one information from another one. For example, when we have to think, they are very important that when we develop a thought, we have many alternative thoughts in our brain. Sometimes they're only slightly different, thought one from thought B and thought C when we solve a problem. And we have to decide maybe later on which of the thoughts is the one we want to follow. So it's almost like an evolutionary process. We have all these ideas, they pop up in our brain. We have to memorize these popped up ideas instantaneously and long term. And the only part of our brain that can do this is our autobiographical memory center. Only the hippocampus can do that. So we wouldn't be able to develop any idea, any plan, we wouldn't be able to process and evolve any constructive model of anything if we hadn't had these cells.
But that brings up a really important point, since these cells are being suppressed. And many of us notice across society that people are suffering personality changes, they're losing rationality. I have seen people who have lost job skills. And I believe it's related to these injections, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'll come to that in a second.
Oh, okay, okay. I'm getting ahead of, I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry. It's really important. But what also important is this happened already many, many years before. It started already decades before. Because, as I will show you maybe in this slide here, the function of these index neurons, these new nerve cells that are produced every day, is not only memorizing our own thoughts or anything that we experience. They also have another function. They are the neuronal correlate of psychological resilience. And that's very important.
Mental health.
Yeah, that we are resilient to stress, stressful events. If they are not produced, resilience goes down, which means that every life event that might make us anxious, that is maybe difficult to comprehend, would lead to depression. So if we shut down the production of these cells, at the same time, depression rates go up.
Wow.
And to tell you, in 2017 was the highest recorded depression rate on Earth ever. 2017 already. In 2019, the World Health Organization said in a paper, now depression is the #1 disease worldwide.
Really?
That means if you reverse the argument, in 2019, in summer, we had the lowest production rate of index neurons in the hippocampus. Another thing that these cells do, they are the neuronal correlate of curiosity. If you shut down their production, animals stop being curious. They don't seek novelty anymore. They just sit around and run in circles, but they don't move around and roam around and check out their environment, which would be important for their survival.
Yes.
They wouldn't do that anymore.
But we see this in humans now. There's no curiosity. They watch the Super Bowl, basically.
Yeah.
But there's no curiosity. Even journalists aren't curious about asking questions anymore. There's no curiosity.
But to be curious, you also have to have psychological resilience. Because when you are curious, you enter new space, new areas, and you might not like what you are seeing. So if you don't, so you have to be prepared for that. You have to accept that the new information might be stressful. So we need psychological resilience to be curious.
Oh, this explains censorship. They don't want to be exposed to any new information that might cause psychological stress.
No, I think they want to stress us, but they have some other idea behind that, and I'll come to that in a second.
Okay, no, but I mean like the safe spaces of the political left.
Oh, I see.
They want to have a safe space where they have no information that contradicts their current belief system. And in order to do that, they have to censor all other voices that might challenge that.
Yeah, it's difficult to accept different opinions if you have no resilience.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they say they're triggered. Everybody's triggered now, triggered by the slightest thing.
Yeah. So but the slightest thing that is worrisome could cause depression because you have no resilience. Actually, every antidepressant that is on this planet right now and distributed to people, every antidepressant has only one function, essentially, that is activating adult hippocampal neurogenesis.
Interesting.
So if you block adult hippocampal neurogenesis in an animal by chemicals, by radiation, by whatever, genetically, then no antidepressant would work anymore.
Oh, interesting.
It's just
so the serotonin reuptake inhibition
would not work anymore.
But it affects.
Serotonin is is essentially a growth factor for neurogenesis.
Got it.
An activate.
So when they keep more serotonin concentrations flooded in the brain, then it allows these cells to develop more.
Yeah, you have a higher production rate.
But then, why is it that, like when I grew up, we were all very resilient. We were outdoor kids. We didn't get triggered by anything. And that trait has stuck with people like myself and perhaps you as well, and the people that we know. But then there's another segment of society that has lost the ability, apparently, to generate these cells. What's going on?
I come to that in a second.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I just want to maybe finish very quickly what all the functions are of these cells.
Okay, go
Because once you understand that, you will understand the consequences of that much more deeply.
Okay.
So the other thing that, of course, is that if you are curious, you make new experiences. And if you are making new experiences, if you're not doing the same thing all over again every day, then you increase your individuality. And the broader your individuality is, the more your personality has personal experiences, the more creative you can be.
Yes.
Okay? And the last thing that I discovered, I just actually, I'm in the process, hopefully, to publish a paper. It's in the peer review process right now. In 2002, there was a Nobel Prize in what is called economics, given to a psychologist, Daniel Kahneman. And he discovered that we have two thinking systems. A very fast one, which acts more or less stereotypically, just doing repetitive what we always do, essentially also working with, I would say, a behavior that is almost like genetic, like instinct.
Yes.
You know, for example, if you have no resilience, there comes something fearful, your instinct tells you, go to the group.
Right.
Find shelter.
These are like cognitive shortcuts.
Yeah.
That mostly get the right answer quickly because you might have to make a decision quickly.
Exactly, but you are not thinking about it.
Right.
It's more like a reflex.
Right.
And but there's another system. It's called System 2, which requires energy and is real thinking. And for this distinction, he got the Nobel Prize for this discovery, because in certain situations it's better to think.
Yeah. Right.
And
like creating economic policy.
But the point is, the System 1 is always active. It's a default. That's how we work by default. System 2 has to be activated by gut feeling. You have to have a gut feeling, an emotional sensation. You need to activate your thinking process. But the reason why it's not always active, the thinking process, is because it requires energy, mental energy.
Yes.
And it was unclear until recently what this mental energy is. And I'm just in the process, I've just submitted a paper where I show that these cells are the source of the mental energy.